And joining me once again is Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She is chair of the House Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. Congresswoman Dingell, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you, and 4 more days or 3 days and something and counting.
It's hard to believe we are so close. We are in the final sprint. So you heard yourself there back in August. I have to get an update for you. How are you feeling right now about the state of the race in Michigan, Congresswoman?
Look, I'm going to be really honest with you. I knew we were going to be tight. And said it's going to be a purple state and every vote's going to matter until the polls close. I really am going to tell you it is that tight right now. I do not believe either candidate has won Michigan yet. I think I'd rather be in our shoes than President Trump's, but who votes is really going to determine what the outcome of this election is. And I may be willing, after spending a weekend in many, many different places, from union halls to veterans halls to farmers market, schools, tailgates, be willing to make a prediction. But right now, this is a very, very competitive state.
And I'm curious, Congresswoman, what specifically are you seeing on the ground there? Because obviously President Biden was able to flip Saginaw and Kent counties. Do you see Harris winning those 2 areas?
So, you know, these are very complicated. And by the way, as you talk about both of those, they're competitive Senate seat and congressional seats in those areas as well. Many people are saying it's Michigan, 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 because we have 2 open House seats and a third competitive House seat. Well, I believe women are clearly breaking for the vice president. And I am guessing, hoping, feeling there's going to be a significant turnout of the women. There are 4 areas that I have been watching for the last month. Union halls. I mean, clearly, the vice president's not going to get all of the union workers, but she is. I think there's been a lot of work. I myself been in union hall every day this week, as have many other people. And I think that when you do the comparison between the 2 candidates, she is going to get more votes than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. There was a young African-American male problem. A lot of people have been talking to them. They've been to many of the places. And I think more people are energized to turn out and vote. That's something we've got to make sure happens till the polls close. But I think that's coming back in our direction. And getting young people to turn out, which is one of the reasons the Michigan State rally is so important on Sunday night. The Mideast continues to be a very difficult situation in Michigan.
Well, let me follow up with you. And as you cast this race as one that is effectively deadlocked, I mean, it's really striking to hear you say no one has actually won the state yet. Every little data point could potentially make a difference. So I want to ask you about President Biden's garbage comments earlier this week. Of course, he was referencing the comedian who opened for former President Trump, who referred to Puerto Rico as garbage. Then Biden said Trump supporters are garbage. Then he walked that back and said, look, he was just talking about the comedian and his rhetoric. What is your reaction to hearing that? And could that potentially hurt the vice president in Michigan?
I'm going to say this to you, Chris. Everything can move things in one direction or another. But I will. So the comments at Madison Square Gardens, quite frankly, energized many in the Hispanic community. I really do believe that the president did not mean, and look, I respect everybody's right to vote who they believe is the strongest candidate, and that after this election, we've got to come back together. I think the vice president was very clear about how she felt. And I'm not going to say it didn't bother some people, but many of the people who have expressed that to me were already strongly supporting President Trump. So is it influencing some votes? I'm going to tell you right now, we are that tight that every little thing can. But I think the people that most responded to it that are the ones that were already there. I'm not sure. I think the bigger mistake was at the Madison Square Gardens, where the joke was made to begin with.
Let me ask you, Congresswoman, because you also just mentioned the war in Gaza. On Sunday, I was able to speak with Senator Bernie Sanders about someone who is opposed to basically the Biden-Harris administration because of their handling in the war in Gaza. I'm going to play that exchange and get your reaction on the other side.
My own view has been that the United States should not continue to provide financial aid or offensive weapons to Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government. But what I would say to Layla and to all those people who are thinking of not voting or maybe even voting for Trump, Trump is even worse on this issue. While I disagree with Biden and Harris, they are still better, a lot better than what Trump and Vance are talking about.
Congresswoman, is that message resonating, and has Vice President Harris done enough to win over her skeptics on this issue in Michigan?
So I want to say that this is all the communities are hurting. The Jewish community is hurting. The Arab American Muslim population is hurting. And it's also, by the way, not monolithic like any other community. So as we're speaking right now, President Trump's in Dearborn and he's talking to some of those members. But the mayor of Dearborn, who is not endorsing, has made it clear, or has tweeted, President Trump will never be his president. He remembers the things that President Trump said when he was first elected president, the Muslim ban. So, you know, there's some that are going to skip the top of the ticket. There are some that are going to vote for Jill Stein, and some are going to vote for the vice president. And quite frankly, what happens in that community is going to be one of it will impact. It's one of the factors that will impact what happens on Tuesday. And
Congresswoman, just finally, what's your sense of the Senate race? You talked about the high stakes there between Mike Rogers and Alyssa Slotkin.
Look, I think Alyssa Slotkin has been ahead, except in one or two. There was a poll that came out yesterday. These are tight races. And obviously what happens at the top of the ticket could impact it. On that, I would feel more comfortable on giving an edge to Alyssa Slotkin right now, but it's an edge. I'm telling you, we have a lot of very, very close races in Michigan. And anything that could happen between now and Tuesday could and will impact the outcome.
All right. Well, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, it is always so great to get your perspective on what is actually happening on the ground in Michigan. We will be in touch quite frequently between now and Election Day. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Always great to see you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.